How's everyone doing this morning? All right, Robert.
Doing pretty good, Chico.
Good. Thank you, Corey.
Doing tired. That's as best I can say, is doing really tired.
You're feeling tired?
Yes.
Okay, how come?
I'm staying up to like 1 o'clock playing Animal Crossing.
Ah, all right. At least you're having fun.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Okay, good. Good. Let me share my screen. And let me share the agenda. So we will wait 1 minute and start.
Good morning, Zico.
Good morning, Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm getting the hang of just working out of the house again.
I think I got it.
Yeah?
It requires a different kind of organization.
Oh, yes. You have to be disciplined.
Yeah. So I've worked really hard on keeping
Too many
my
distractions in the house. Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite sentence. I certainly enjoy some aspects of it, but it is a mixed bag.
I need people.
You need people.
I need people.
I see. You're missing the
I'm
campus
missing my
life.
students. Yeah, I'm missing them. I spend a lot of time in I'm licensed to be a counselor, but we don't really have that in my job description, but I end up by doing a lot of mental health counseling. I miss that. I miss my coaching.
Yes.
I miss that stuff that I do.
Yes. Well, hopefully we don't have to wait too long before we resume the new normal.
I'll bet we don't come back before September.
Yeah, September is an aggressive date, but let's wait and see. It's only April. Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is the agenda, not just for today. I want to talk about the agenda for this week and next week. So today we're going to go over chapter 3, and I don't think there's a whole lot to chapter 3. So we should be able to complete chapter 3 today. But the highest priority, of course, is to cover chapter 3 this week. So we will take whatever time it takes. My gut feeling tells me, a couple of hours, and we should thoroughly finish chapter 3. And then on Thursday, this is a Thursday class, we're going to start chapter 4, which is firewalls. And it's a little bit more challenging. There's more material in there, and we do want to take our time. So we're going to do as much of chapter 4 as we can on Thursday, and then we will finish chapter 4 a week from today, the following Tuesday. And let me show you what the course looks like, which I know you've all seen. Here we go. So these are the 11 chapters. So we finished chapter 1 and 2. I'm confident we'll finish 3 today. We will start 4 on Thursday. The assignment is not due, the exam and the assignment are not due until week 4. So you only have to focus on week 3 in terms of exam and lab work. And then chapter 5 is IPS, IDS, and there isn't really a whole lot to IPS, IDS. So I'm quite confident we'll finish it next week. So what I'm telling you is I would like to finish chapter 3, 4, and 5 this week and next week. And it shouldn't be that hard. But the highest priority is to do a thorough job. And then, we will start with chapter 6 on week 5. And this is basically where things starts to get a little bit more serious from the security point of view. And we want, 6 weeks. We don't have 6 weeks. Remember, week 10 is SBA and final exam. So we have 5 weeks to cover that. And that should be sufficient amount of time. So this is the master plan. Okay. So let's dive into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is all about AAA. And I'm sure you remember, we've talked about AAA, authenticate, authorize, and account, which is the same thing as logging. And I want to show you what we did in chapter 2 for AAA, and then contrast it with chapter 3 before we dive into it. So let me bring up the slides for chapter 2. This is chapter 4. Here we go, chapter 2. So in chapter 2, we created accounts, everybody. They were local accounts. We created those accounts on the switches and on the routers. And this is the authentication part. The problem with creating local accounts is, what if you have 100 switches and 10 routers? And this may sound like a very large number to you. It really isn't. But let's just say, you know, a medium-sized company, 100 switches and 10 routers, that's 110 devices. And let's say you have 3 network system administrators. That's 360 accounts. So each of these 3 users is going to have a unique account on each of these 110 devices times 3. So that is an awful lot of local accounts that need to be maintained. And we want to avoid this. And AAA, using an AAA service, enables us to elevate the scope from local to an enterprise level. And all of you have taken CS240A, and some of you are in CS240B, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about Active Directory and the benefits of Active Directory. And of course, benefit number 1 is single sign-on. And that's benefit number 1 of AAA, a single sign-on. So we elevate the account from a local device to an enterprise-wide. And if you want, we can actually integrate AAA into Active Directory, so you wouldn't have to have a second enterprise level account. You can just use your one and only Active Directory account. So this is one. Number 2 is authorize. And if you guys remember, in chapter 2, we talked about very good, limiting command availability. So we talked about privilege levels, and we talked about role-based. So I hope you still remember that. So we had 2 different ways of managing this, except again, we were managing it locally. We were managing this locally on each of these 110 devices, and we don't want to do that. We want to elevate it to the enterprise, so we can only set it up once and use it on as many devices as we want. And of course, we also talked about logging, and we talked about, give me a second, this is the slide I'm looking for, syslog. And we talked about priority 0 through 7, where 0 is the highest priority emergencies and 7 is the lowest debugging. And this is logging. Syslog is logging. Logging is the same thing as the third A, authenticate, authorize, and account. Account is logging. And we were doing this locally. So there's really nothing new in terms of concept. There's nothing new in chapter 3. We're just elevating the A, and A from a machine level to an enterprise level. And the larger the enterprise, the more sense this makes. If you end up working for Google or Microsoft or IBM or any large company with many thousands of switches and hundreds of routers, you don't really want a local account, and you don't really want to log locally, and you don't want to authorize locally on each of these devices. You want to do it at the enterprise level. And this is what AAA brings to the table. So any questions about that before we dive into the details? Straightforward? Would you agree? Okay. I'm going to assume you're all nodding your head. Go ahead.
So like HP, they usually don't have the, they only have local account for like the network people.
I honestly don't know. I hope not.
Yeah,
I hope not, because HP, you know, has broken into multiple companies, and each of these smaller companies are massive by themselves, and they have, you know, many hundreds of switches and dozens of routers. And I'm finding it hard to believe that they are still using a local account. You will see today with AAA, you can still have a local account as a backup account. You know, what if you cannot get to this directory service to authenticate, for example? You still need to access the router, and you may still have a local account, and we will do this today as a backup account.
Okay.
Just in case the service is down. But I don't think you're relying on this local account to log on to all of these different services. And one more thing before I take on the next questions, please everyone remember, no generic accounts. Do not use generic accounts. Don't have one account for everyone to use, because we lose traceability. We don't know who did what. And the last few years I worked for Hewlett Packard, I was on the IT audit team. We were auditing our contract manufacturers. And I would flag, when I was doing my IT audit at, let's say, ST Microelectronic, and I would see that they are using a generic account, I will immediately flag it.
Yeah, that's you do.
This is a no-no. From a security point of view, no generic accounts, you lose traceability. Traceability is important because we need to know who did what. Go ahead.
Yeah, they still do. I mean, like you say, when I was still there a couple of years ago, it was a lot of them still use generic administrative account.
And like I said, next time they get audited, or if I was auditing them, if I was the auditor, I would flag them. I would tell them this is a security violation.
Yeah.
And it's a long list. I used to flag all kind of things, short passwords, I would flag. If they didn't protect the computer against brute force security account, I would flag. So I had my checklist, and certainly, very high on my list of checklist was generic accounts. Generic accounts are a serious security problems. Local accounts are a security problem because, how many of these local accounts do you want to maintain, and are they all synchronized? So if you change the password on one switch, it doesn't change the password in the other switches. And how do you keep track of what the password is on all these devices? And if a device is to force you to change your password, which all devices do, then what do? You log on to the remaining 995 switches and routers, and you change your password. It's just not manageable. And this is why we have directory services. So we can use a single account for our admin and everyday purposes. Are we good? I love those questions, so keep asking them. Okay. So let's go into the slides, and we will do labs. So if we don't really want to do chapter 4, this is on Thursday, and we're done with chapter 2. So let's just focus on chapter 3. Okay. So authentication without, this is the first A, without an AAA service. Remember, an AAA service is similar to a directory service. Okay, so we have local accounts, and we've talked plenty about local accounts. And they're saying Telnet is vulnerable to brute force attacks. Well, everything is vulnerable to brute force attacks. I really don't know what they mean here. It's not any more vulnerable than any other kind of an account. And this is why we say things like, if you fail to log on successfully for 3 times within 2 minutes, we're going to do something to your account. Like we're going to lock down your account for 5 minutes, or we're going to lock it down indefinitely until you call an IT help desk. And this is definitely the case if you work for a financial institution or any institution where security is extremely important. But the norm is if you fail to log on successfully 3 times within a minute or 2, then we're going to lock your account for 5 minutes. And that is a measure to counter brute force attacks. Yes, we definitely don't want to use Telnet. By now, you all know that Telnet is an old protocol that doesn't encrypt. SSH is the newer version. It does the same thing, and it encrypts. And it's any less vulnerable to brute force than a Telnet or any other kind of an account. So AAA, so these are the 3 A's, everybody. The first one is authentication. Okay, who are you? The system wants to know who you are. And are you who you claim you are? And number 2 is authorize. Okay, now I know you're Zico or Alex or Ala or whoever. What are you allowed to do? And equally as important, maybe even more important, what aren't you allowed to do? And accounting is logging. We want to keep track of what happened on these devices. So authentication modes. So we have local, and we have an AAA service. An ACS server is a Cisco platform that provides AAA services. So this is Cisco selling their products, and I'm just going to show you very quickly. So if I was to come here, okay, Cisco Access Control Server is authentication, authorization, and accounting platform that lets you centrally manage access to network resources, blah, blah. So this is the Cisco AAA product, basically. And of course, they have additional bells and whistles to it, but that's what it is. But let me show you this box over here, everyone. This is really why I came to this website. So we have the ACS service, and then we have the directory service. So this ACS service can use a directory service, and this directory service can be Active Directory. And your single sign-on can be truly a single sign-on for all kinds of different devices, for your Windows 10, for your Windows servers, for Linux, Unix, and for your network devices. So this is one advantage of using ACS, is it has the capability of linking into a standard directory service like Active Directory. Okay. So what they are telling us here is, instead of this user logging on to this router and being authenticated by the router is configured for an AAA service, and then it has to go to an AAA server to authenticate and get back to the user. So this is quite common when we're dealing with directory services. You know, you want to log onto a device, and then it's going to authenticate you from a central database. Okay. So this is the authorization, and then we have the accounting, and accounting is logging, and what do you want to log? You can log network event, connection event, EXE, command events, etc. events. So you can basically log the activities that are taking place on these network devices. Okay. And what we have here is we have a local account. Okay, so we've done this many times before. Okay. And now you're saying I'm using an AAA service to authenticate locally. So we're not going to an AAA service to authenticate. We're doing it all locally. So this is still very much a local account. And I will show you in a couple of minutes, you can have a backup local account, but the same thing that I said before about generic accounts is true. So I don't think you want to have 110 local accounts. You just need, you know, a local account in case you're unable to be authenticated by a directory service, but you don't want to have too many of them. And they should only work when the directory service is down. So if the directory service said, sorry, Zico, this is not your password, I'm not going to say, okay, I'm just going to use the local account. The local account shouldn't work in this case. It should only work if we're unable to communicate with the directory service. And I will show you that. So we're all familiar with the enable for encryption. And this is if you want to use a local account. And if you want the account name to be case sensitive, the password is always case sensitive, right, everybody? The account name is almost always not case sensitive. But if you want it to be case sensitive, you can. And then if you want to go to an AAA service, there are two protocols. And you're going to see these two terms over and over again today, because we have the directory service, we have the AAA service, cool, everybody. And now we need to be able to communicate with it. And to communicate with it, we need a protocol. And we have two protocols to do that. We have an open protocol, which is Radius. And then we have a Cisco protocol, which is TACACS. And we've seen this many times before, where the industry would have an open standard and Cisco would have a slightly different, sometimes very different standard to do the same thing, and sometimes almost identical. I've looked at some open standards and Cisco standards, and I would put them next to each other and I would go over them, and I couldn't. And I'm sure there is a difference between the two, but me just, you know, spending 5 minutes, and it's like, I can't see any difference between the two. Why would they have two different standards if they're identical? In this case, Radius and TACACS are different, but these are the two different protocols that we can use to communicate with an AAA service. Any questions here? And we can do both. So we can say, let's use Radius to authenticate, and if that fails, then let's use local. And I will show you that. And the local becomes your backup, not your primary, your backup. Okay. Fine tuning, okay. So attempts maximum. So after so many tries, you can fail. This does not work on packet tracer, but we've seen these services before. And this is mostly, not exclusively, to protect against brute force. All right. Again, there's nothing new here. We can authenticate locally. So let's say this user wants to SSH into this router, and we have a local account. We're not using an AAA service, and we authenticate locally. And this is what we have done up until this point in all the courses we've taken. Or if you want, we can use an AAA service. And we will be doing this in a few minutes. Okay. And Cisco has this ACS service, and for Windows Server, very good. So what's your take? What's your take on Cisco Secure ACS for Windows Server? What does this mean to you? What do you think it means? Anybody? Active Directory. This is what it means, Active Directory. They want to integrate it into Active Directory. Why do they want to integrate it into Active Directory? Because Active Directory is planet Earth's most popular directory service. And remember, the promise is a single sign-on. And Cisco is saying, don't worry about it. You can continue to use your single sign-on to log on to switches and routers. We don't really need a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth account. You can use your one and only directory service account for everything else plus Cisco devices. So these are the two different protocols. TACACS is the Cisco protocol to communicate between a user and an AAA service. And Radius is the open protocol. Have you guys heard the term Radius? Radius is quite popular, actually. And I'm quite confident, we all use it. You may not know you're using it, but you're using it. So is this a familiar name, a familiar protocol with anybody?
We did a lab in 284 by setting up a Radius server.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Joey. Okay, very good, very good. And so you were using it to communicate with a directory service. What was the back end? So remember, Radius is just a communication protocol. What did you have in the back end?
We were just using it to set up an account to authorize connecting into a router in the back of the classroom.
And where was that account? Was it in Active Directory? Was it on a local server, Windows server? Where was that account?
Just on the local machine.
And the local machine was what? Windows?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I was trying to get to. So we can use Radius to communicate with a Windows machine, and ACS can communicate with Active Directory. Okay. So Radius, basically, it's to authenticate. So when I used to teach at Lane, I no longer teach at Lane. And if I wanted to use their wireless service, they would ask for an account and a password, and they were using Radius to authenticate. Say, okay, give me your account, give me your password. And Radius is built into many, many platforms, including most of the wireless access point platforms. So you can authenticate the user before they have access to it. Of course, you can have local accounts. This is what the home. So if you go out and you buy a home wireless access point, you probably want to use a local account on that machine. But if it's an enterprise, if it's a university, if it's a company, you don't really want accounts on each of these local wireless access points. Okay, we've had that conversation before. You want to elevate this to the enterprise, and then we use Radius to authenticate. So these are some differences between these two protocols, TACACS and Radius. I'm not going to go over all of it. Are you guys familiar with CHAP? Okay, so CHAP is an authentication, and we are using hashing, and we talked about hashing before. Okay, and we don't really hash the password and send it, which what we did with the routers. Was it last week we did this with the routers? Sometimes I get confused between this and the other networking course I teach. But that's what we do sometimes to authenticate. You know, the two devices have the same password, and then we hash it and we send it, and then they hash it and send it, and then we can compare, and then they authenticate each other. In this case, you know, they pick a string and they add the password to it, and then they hash the whole thing, and then they send the string to the other device, and then they add the locally configured password, and then they hash the whole thing, and then they compare the two hash keys. So you can see, you know, hashing is quite common, and CHAP is not new. CHAP has been used with PPP, which is another super popular protocol for, I don't know, 30+ years. So we're not talking about anything new here. And it's not the most secure, but for many purposes, it's good enough. So here they are showing us the authentication process, and you can do this on your own. Okay, so the client is communicating with the network device, and then the network device is communicating with the AAA platform, and ACS is a Cisco product that provides an AAA plus with additional benefits platform. Okay. And then you have to configure the client and the server for either Radius or TACACS. All right. Here we go. So we can authenticate with Radius, we can authenticate with ACS. And please, everybody, you never ever want to use both. It's A or B. Using both, it's like you're adding more work. And what's the benefit? Back to CBA. If you really want to do both, it's like, why do I need both? Why do I need Radius and TACACS? So you're going to have to sit down and decide, do you want to use TACACS? And remember, TACACS is a Cisco protocol, or do you want to use the open equivalent, which is Radius, and then you go from there. But you most certainly don't want to support both because it's more work for you. And they use specific protocols to communicate, and there's nothing new there. All protocols require a port to communicate between the client and the server. Okay. So let's do a lab, everybody. How about if we do a lab? I'm trying to get to the, here we go. Okay. So let's do a lab. And I think we've covered, what slide are we on? We've covered quite a few slides. We're in 47. Okay, we're toward the end. And that's because the concept is quite familiar. And this is CHAP, everybody. If you want to read on CHAP for authentication which uses hashing, you can read about it. And this is the beauty of working in 2020 or being a student in 2020. You can Google pretty much anything and very quickly learn about it. And this is what I do when I'm studying. You know, I'm constantly Googling the things that I come across and don't understand, or maybe I understand, but I've forgotten, and I just need to refresh my memory. And network policy server. Okay, this is a service that is built into Windows Server 2016 and 2019. And for those of you that have taken CS240A or B, or taking CS240B right now, you know, this is one of those roles that are bundled into Windows Server. Okay, so let's do a lab. And please ask. So we're gonna start simple. We're gonna start with local account. And there's nothing new here because we've done this before, but we're gonna start here. And we're using these, the packet tracer labs from before, okay. So no login block. Remember, you know, block for 5 minutes after 3 failed attempts within 30 seconds. So basically I'm removing it because I don't want to deal with it while I'm doing this lab. And then we created a username. This is a local username. What's the big deal about privileged 15? Anybody? What's the range of privileges?
0 to 15, 15 being the highest.
Very good. And the highest being, the most powerful. So this is what administrators have. They have privilege 15. Okay, so we're creating a junior admin privilege 15. I don't know if you want to give it junior admin 15, but in this case we're doing, and then we're authentication, and you can see the local, everybody, which means, we're authenticating locally. We're not going to an AAA server. And this is what the purpose of this lab is. And then down below, I have console 0, and I'm saying, authentication default, which is currently is to use the local. So let's go ahead, copy and paste and see what this does. Okay, the only thing different we're doing here is, we're not specifying a unique password for console. If you guys remember from before, console had its own password, v2.0 had its own password, and now we're saying, no, I don't want to do this. Just use the locally configured account. That's the only difference. And I'm going to paste it. And console 123, priv mode 123 from before, and conft and paste. And I can do show run and look at the whole thing, or I can do show run and then include, which basically means include this string AAA. And this is what I'm interested in right here. So let's try it out from LT1. Okay, let's do a console. So desktop. Okay, let me exit first. And username is junior admin. Does it say case sensitive? It doesn't say case sensitive. So the account name can be uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to use lowercase junior admin, because it doesn't tell me that it needs to be case sensitive. The password is always case sensitive on all platforms. That's like the one thing that is always case sensitive, the password. Because remember, in the password, we say, use uppercase and lowercase, and therefore it is case sensitive. And password is Cisco 12345, and I'm in. And priv mode 123. And as you can see, I'm no longer using the previous console password, console 123. Now I'm using this account and this password. So I was able to log on as console using the local account. And AAA enabled me to do what I did here, which is basically to say, I don't really need a separate password for console. I can just use the locally configured account. And I can do an SSH from here. SSH -L, junior admin again, lowercase, 192.168.1.1, and Cisco 12345. And I'm in. And show AAA sessions. And I have two sessions, a console session and an SSH session. And show user, is it user all? And it's going to give you a lot of information about who is currently logged on. Any questions on this lab? We're not really doing an awful lot other than enabling AAA locally. That's pretty much all we're doing in this scenario one. We're enabling AAA locally. But you still need local accounts on each device, and we've said, please don't do that. Do yourself a favor, do everybody a favor, and don't do that. All right, let's move on. Let's add a little bit more complexity to this. I'm done with this. Let's do the next one. So we're using radius. And let's take a look at the AAA service on this server right here. So I'm going to go to the server. I'm going to go to services. I'm going to go to AAA. And let's take a closer look, everybody. Okay. Do you want to use the Radius protocol to communicate with this database, or do you want to use the TACACS? And this lab, we're using Radius. Okay. And then I have local accounts. I have an admin account. I have a junior admin account. And of course, I have to configure the client, the server that the client is going to be communicating with. And this service is on. And we're using port 1645. What kind of a port is 1645? Off the top of your head. What are the 3 different categories of port numbers? Number 1.
Assigned port numbers.
Say it again, Cody.
Assigned.
Okay, very good. What's number 2? So we have well-known, right, everybody? So
There's
that's
well-known,
0 through 1023.
Is it ephemeral?
And then we have, that's number 3, ephemeral, which is the same thing as dynamic. And number 2 is registered. So this is a registered port number. Remember, 0 through 1023, well-known, 80, 443, 20, 21. I can go on. Okay, the popular services you and I use every single day. And then registered means, the company had to go and pay for this port. Another very popular registered port is 3389, which is for RDP. RDP is another protocol which we use to remotely connect to a device. And it needs a port. And the port Microsoft paid for is 3389. And then ephemeral, almost all protocols use an ephemeral port number in the source port. So when you're using HTTP, the destination is 80. Well, what do you put in the source? Because we always have a source and destination. Source MAC, destination MAC, source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port. Well, when it comes to ports, we always have a destination, but we still need to put something in the source. And the vast majority of the protocols don't really have anything specific to put in the source. So we end up putting an ephemeral or a dynamic. And then it gets used because when the receiving service sends back the segment, it flips the source and the destination. All right, so this is this. So let's take a look here. So I'm disabling the login block for, I'm deleting the old local accounts. If I was to come over here, console 123, mode 123, and show run. And you can see I want to disable this login block for 30 attempts, 3 within 30. So 3 attempts within 30 seconds, blocked for 30 seconds. And 30 seconds is way too short. Most companies do 5 minutes. And then we have local accounts, which I want to get rid of. Okay. And I'm creating my backup account. So I'm calling it local admin. This is my backup account. This is a generic account. I already talked plenty about generic accounts. This is just an exercise. We're doing this just to get educated. So I would be thinking twice about having a generic account and everyone knowing what the generic account password is. Remember, generic accounts, there is no accountability. There is no traceability. And if something bad happens, you don't want to say, I didn't do it. You want to be able to say, I didn't do it with confidence. I didn't do it with confidence means I only use my one and only account. And I didn't use a generic account. And here we are. AAA new model, Radius server, okay, 192.168.110, which is this server right here. And we're using port 1645, and that's the port that the service is configured for. And we want to authenticate with a password, which is Cisco 12345. Okay. And then I have to tell this local router how to configure. And I said use Radius first, and then use local if Radius is not available. So this statement right here, everybody. AAA authentication login default group radius space local. It's really, really important. It's saying use radius first. And if you're unable to communicate with radius, only then can you use a local account. So if you were to start with a local account and the router goes to the radius server and the radius server says, I don't know who this user is, you're not going to be able to authenticate. The router will say, no, why don't you use your radius account or your AAA service account, radius being a protocol that enables the router to communicate with that service. And the same thing is true for TACACS. So let's copy and paste and give it a try. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to come to router 0, and I'm going to paste. And let's see what it tells us to do. Okay. I'm going to do show run. Include. Remember this include, everybody. It's very useful. Yep. I'm going to authenticate using radius first, and then I'm going to use a local. And if we want to see our backup local account, include username. And this is the local account that I created called local admin, and the password is Cisco 12345. Okay, so let's see how this is going to work. So I'm going to come to LT1 and I'm going to log on as console. So let me see what accounts I have on the AAA service. So I have an account called admin and I have an account called junior admin. And those are not local accounts. Remember, we deleted the local accounts. We no longer have a local account called admin. We no longer have a local account called junior admin. These are AAA service accounts. So let me authenticate. So I'm going to log on as admin, and Cisco 12345. And you're going to see it's going to take slightly longer, hopefully not too long, because now the router has to communicate with the AAA service using radius and get back to the router. And it said, yep, you're good. EN, I still have to enter the privileged password. And now I'm in. Are we good, everybody? So I didn't authenticate with a local account. And now I can do the same thing from the switch. I can add 10 more routers and 100 more switches and configure them for AAA radius, and I would be able to log on to all of these different devices with one of those two AAA accounts, admin, junior admin. And I know there's nothing new. You've all taken CS240A. You all understand directory services. You all understand the importance of elevating accounts from local to enterprise and not having local accounts. So let's do another one.
Cisco?
Go ahead.
You notice that in the AAA server, you can see the password. Is that secure? I mean,
very good. Remember, very good. It's an excellent point. Thank you very much. Yes, we can certainly see the password. So they didn't hash it, camping.
Yeah.
And that's an excellent observation, camping. And it's a security consideration. Now remember, only the administrators have access to this service, but still, you're making an excellent point, camping. This is not hashed. This is not hashed because this is how we want to store passwords. We want to hash. For example, I can be a Active Directory system administrator and I wouldn't be able to see anybody's password. I can reset the password to whatever I want, but I wouldn't be able to see it. And that's good. We don't really want system administrators to be able to see anybody's password. And in this case, they can. So, yep, excellent observation. It's just not as evolved of a service as Active Directory, for example. But
Okay.
thank you for noticing that. So let's log on using SSH. Okay, SSH minus L. Let's do junior admin here, and 192.168.1.1. I'm trying to log on to router 0, and the password is Cisco 12345. Oh, that was quick. Okay, and priv mode 123, and voila. And I was authenticated by the AAA server. So went to the router said, yep, I have a radius service configured. Let me authenticate you from there. Any questions? So the one thing I want to show you before the end of this lab is I want to disable the radius service and use the local account. In fact, let me do this. Let me exit. And let me see if I can use the local account while the radius service is operational. Because in theory, you should not be able to use a local account while the radius service is operational, because you're going to go to the radius service to authenticate, and the authentication is going to fail, and you're not going to be able to log on. But let's try it. So I'm going to come here, and I'm going to log on with the local account. Local admin, and I believe that's what we called it. Local admin, local 12345. Okay, very good. Everybody, and local 12345. Okay, everybody. Why did I fail? Local 12345. I entered the correct account and the correct password, and it is going to radius, and it's saying there is no account called local account, and I am failing the authentication. However, if the router is unable to go to the AA service, and let me come back to this line over here, right here. Okay. So first use the radius service to authenticate. If you're unable to do this, you can use the local. This is the importance of this local command. So that is a backup for AA. And by now you all know AA is the service and radius is the communication, or TACACS is the communication protocol. So let me see, what does it say next here? Enable logging. Okay. And then the logging is going to show on the console. But let me jump to 14, everybody. You can do this in your own. It's no big deal. It's just going to log all the events. Well, it's an AAA logging. Let me see, blah, blah. Okay, and then you can watch. I still want to jump down below. So let me come down here to the AAA service and turn it off. Okay. And now when the router, the switch, are trying to communicate with the radius service, it's off. There is no AA service. Radius is enabled and configured, but there is no running AAA service. So let me come to LT1, and let me log on as console, and I'm going to log on as junior admin, Cisco 12345. What's going to happen?
Fail.
Okay. And it's going to take its time, hopefully not too long, but it's going to try repeatedly, and the service is off, and it's going to fail any minute now. Still waiting. Here we go. Okay, login invalid. Well, let's try the local account. Everybody, let's try the local account. Local admin, local 12345, and the router is configured for radius, so it's going to try and communicate with radius, and the communication is not going to happen because the service is down. And then it says, okay, now let me try locally. So it's going to take a little bit because it's going to try to communicate with radius, fail, and success, and I'm in. And now I'm using a local account. Questions? Straightforward? Move on?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, yep.
We can move on. Yeah.
I agree. And you all understand the directory services. We've spent a lot of time with directory services, and it makes these AAA discussions so much easier because like you understand the concept and now it's just the syntax. Okay.
I think with most of this, it's a lot of it's the good practice, but once we get somewhere where they have their standard of what things are set up for, and then you have to use those or work with those, that's where it'll really go like, hey, yeah, I remember this.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Frank. I want you guys to remember this. I want you to remember this, and I think it will serve you really, really well. So I don't know where you're going to end up, but let's say, you know, you end up working for the Corvallis School District and they're using local accounts. And I don't want you just to say, okay, you know, this is how they do it here. And that's fine for the first months, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's okay. You're learning, because the first 4, 5, 6 months, you know, you're just making notes and you're learning and you're asking a lot of questions and you're not making an awful lot of suggestions. Please remember this. But then what happens month 7, 8, 9, year 2? Okay, you know there's a better way to do this. Okay, so after you've been there for a while and after you've found your footings, I want you to go start by talking to your fellow administrators and say, hey guys, you know, do you think it would be valuable to get rid of these local accounts and use Active Directory, use an AAA service? And, you know, hopefully they still remember what the benefits are. If not, you can refresh their memories and say, you know, let's go ahead and make this change. And of course, work with management to do this. So please remember this. First few months, you're just learning. You're just learning. So keep your eyes open, your ears open, ask lots of questions, and certainly make notes. And after you feel like, okay, I'm no longer new, I've passed the new phase, now I'm just one of the team, then, you know, you can begin to make suggestions on how to improve things. So don't just settle to whatever they have. If you have ideas and your management wants to know that, and they will appreciate it when you say, you know, there's a better way to do this, and you'll be surprised, you know, how many better ways you will come across. There will just be a ton of better way to do things. And that's why they hired you. They hired you so you can do things better, not just get the job done. And this would be one better way of authenticating. Okay, let's do the next one. TACACS. So this is gonna fly, everybody, because there isn't really a whole lot to it. We're just using a different protocol. So you will see the lab is very, very similar. We're just using a different protocol. Okay. And literally, you know, I just copied the previous lab and I made a few changes. So let's start with the AAA server. This is the AAA service. And if you are to look down below, it says, hey, this should be TACACS. Okay, very good, very good. This is just what's in here. Sorry, everybody. It's configured for TACACS. You see the service type is TACACS. So when you're configuring it, you get to choose between Radius and TACACS, but it's already configured. It is TACACS. So this is the only difference between the two. The previous lab was using Radius, and this is using TACACS protocol. And this is the protocol the router and the AAA service are using to communicate with one another. And there was a slide, a few slides back, that talked about the differences between the two. Just remember, TACACS is Cisco specific. So if you have devices from Hewlett Packard, if you have devices from Northern Telecom, etc., they're not going to support, most likely, they're not going to support TACACS. But everybody supports Radius. So if you're a pure Cisco shop, then you can use TACACS, and I probably would. However, you know, if you have a mixed environment, a hybrid environment, Cisco, Hewlett Packard, Northern Telecom, etc., you're not going to be able to use TACACS on all these devices, and you most certainly don't want to support two. You don't want to support TACACS for these devices and Radius for the other ones. You're just creating more work for you. And if you end up getting a job with an organization that is doing this, like I was saying before, this would be one improvement you can recommend. Okay, so let's take a look at it. We're getting rid of the block 4. I'm deleting the local admin and junior admin accounts because we have them in the AAA database. And over here, I am configuring the TACACS server with a password. Okay, looks familiar, everybody? And then down here, I'm saying authenticate using TACACS first. If that fails, you can use a local account. Okay. Authentication, very good, very good. And then for console, I am saying use default. For VTY, I'm saying use default. They don't have their own passwords like we've done before, and that's it. So this is identical to what we did before. The only difference between this lab and the previous one is we're using TACACS instead of Radius. And configure the router. Console 123, priv mode 123, and paste. And we've done all of this before, so let's just test it. So I'm going to go to LT1. And username. And I can type in the local account. What would happen if I was to start with local admin? Everybody? What would happen if I was to use this account right here?
You would get denied access.
It will fail because it's going to go to the AAA server and the service is working. It says this is I don't have this user and that password in my database, and it's going to fail. So let's do junior admin Cisco 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and success. I'm in. And let me go to LT2 and do SSH. SSH minus L. Admin, not junior admin this time, 192.168.1.1 and Cisco 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm in. Good, everybody? Let me try and use the local account just like we did before. We called it local admin. Local admin. Password local 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it failed. Okay. So let me turn the service off. Off. So I've turned the AA service off. And let me come back here and do the same thing with the local account. Local 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to go to the AA service and it's not going to get a reply because the service is down. And then it says, oh, I have local as a backup, and it's going to use the local account, and I'm in. That's it for authentication. Nothing new here, I hope, in concept. I mean, the detail is new. Nothing new from conceptually. Any questions before we move on? Okay, I'm gonna close. And accounting. Okay, so we did the authentication. Let's do the accounting. So I'm just gonna move to the last lab that I have for chapter 3. And let me log on to the router because we need to configure it. Console 123. Okay. So I'm disabling the block 4 and deleting the local accounts. I'm creating a local backup account. This is all from before. I'm configuring the TACACS. This is not Radius. Okay, very good. Start with TACACS and then local is a backup. Wonderful. And PT doesn't support command level authorization. Okay. So authorization, default group, okay, blah, blah. But we don't really, this is a packet tracer limitation. So if we were using a genuine AAA service and real devices, we would be able to authorize, meaning this user can use the following commands and this user can use all the commands. Just like we did in Chapter 2, except we're doing it at the enterprise level. We're not doing it at a router, per router, switch, per switch. We're just doing it once in the AAA service, and then when this user logs on, they will be limited. Okay. And then we're enabling accounting. Here we go. So enable TACACS accounting. Okay. It's limited in terms of what it supports. This is packet tracer, accounting, network default, start, stop. Yep. So we have a limited set of accounting that packet tracer supports, and that's what we're doing. So let's go ahead and copy and paste and see what we can get out of packet tracer. And I have to admit that it's pretty limited. Packet tracer is pretty limited in terms of authentication and accounting. It's authorization and accounting. It's very good with authentication, which is really the big one. That's always the biggest benefit, but it's pretty limited when it comes to authorization and to accounting. So I'm going to paste it. So let's test it. And we have the accounting logged turned on. So we'll see what we're capturing. So from here, we want to use console. Junior admin, Cisco 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. SSH admin, Cisco 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So to see what we've just captured, so we're going to go to here, OpenTAC accounting app under desktop, AAA accounting, and voila. And that's what we captured. And accounting is logging, and we've captured those login events. Questions? I thought it was going to take us longer, but everybody, this is AAA. And let me come back here for a second. Okay. This is a Cisco service. If you want to watch a marketing video about it, I remember Cisco is the 800-pound gorilla. They have a ton of products and services, and you're going to end up using a lot of those products and services. So don't dismiss the services. Don't focus too much on switches and routers. You still need services to manage, to simplify, to automate, to do more with those routers and switches. So these are very important. And we do have a video on AAA. I don't think these are very long. If you want, we can watch it together, but I don't see any value in watching it together. I just would like you to watch it on your own and it is in Net Academy 34223. Any questions on AAA? This is chapter 3, and this is why on Thursday we're starting with firewalls. It's just not enough material for a week, especially when we have 11 chapters to cover.
Hey, Zika, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ala.
So can we use AAA and VPN?
Can you use AA and not PPN?
VPN, Virtual Private Network.
Well, those are two very different services, Ala. So AAA is an authenticate, authorize, and accounting service. So if you want to log on to a router or a switch, instead of using a local account, you can use a directory service account, and then you can limit what that account can do, and then you can log what that account can do. This is what the AAA service is. VPN is a protocol that enables you to tunnel over the internet. So let's say you want to log on to your office from a coffee shop, and then you can use VPN to go over the internet and to authenticate and to log on successfully. So it's a very, very different protocol. Now, of course, when you VPN, you still need to authenticate. So there's an authentication service built into VPN. And the odds are you will be using your Active Directory account password to authenticate. But VPN is a protocol that gazillions of people use every day when they need to tunnel over the internet to connect to either a remote computer or a remote local area network. Do you see the difference between the two, Ala?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. And VPN is super popular. I mean, this is how, especially now, with everybody working from home, right? Everybody. So all of these knowledge workers that used to drive to the office and go to a cube and work are working from home, and they still need access to the services that they had access to before inside the office. They still need access to their enterprise services, and they VPN. That's the first thing they do in the morning. They VPN into a local area network inside the enterprise, and now they're home, but they have the same access they had when they were in the office. And I and gazillions of people like me did this on a daily basis for a long time. I used to do this from home. I used to do this from coffee shops, and I needed to access my resources inside Hewlett Packard, and I would VPN. And there are lots of products that will, so VPN is the protocol, and then you have products that use the VPN protocol to connect you to either a remote computer or a remote local area network. And a remote local area network is usually the norm. And once you're inside that local area network, you can do pretty much anything you want. One more thing about VPN, and I will move on. You know, when you VPN into a LAN, you get an IP address from that local LAN. So if you were to look at your IP address before you VPN, and it says, you know, whatever it says, 192.168.1.100, and then you VPN, and then you go back and you look at your IP address, you'll see you have a different IP address, because from the network point of view, you are now a member of some enterprise local area network you VPN into. It's a longer answer than you wanted, but it's a better answer.
Zika,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Cody.
I was just going to say for authenticating over a VPN, it's usually done through certificates.
Well, there are lots of different ways to do it, Cody. You can do it through an account password.
Oh,
Remember the multi-factor?
right. That's the way I have it set up here.
But so you can use a single factor, you can use a multi-factor, and you can use certificates. So there, it depends on the enterprise. What does the enterprise do? The problem with certificates, Cody, is most of us don't have a certificate, right? You and I don't have a certificate. So
Yeah, I just generate the certificates locally on my server.
very, very good. Then this is not an
So-
enterprise level authentication. This is just you playing at home.
Right.
Okay. And if you were working for, I don't know, a company with 50,000 people, I don't think they want to generate 50,000 private digital certificate for everybody and then have to renew it every year. So it's an awful lot of work. So the answer is yes, it can be done. You can authenticate using a digital certificate, but you would have to have your own. The much more common way of doing it is two-factor authentication. So you have an account password, and then you have some kind of a token, and then you use the token for a second-factor authentication. That's quite common. And you can imagine they want to make sure this is Zico VPNing into the network from a coffee shop. This is not some guy pretending to be Zico. So they want to make the authentication more secure, and two-factor, multi-factor is many times more secure than a single-factor authentication. So the odds are they use a multi-factor authentication. Someone else had a question.
Yes, Zico, going back to AAA, how do you deploy to the authentication to multiple router?
Very good. I will show you. So let's imagine we have multiple routers. In fact, we can do this as we speak. Do you see it right here, camping?
Yeah.
You just copy this and you paste it
Oh,
on your multiple routers.
Okay.
So take the lab we did.
Mm-hmm.
And add another router or more switches, or you can do it at the switch level, and this is the command right here. Okay. And then of course you have to do the other stuff. You have to say for console go to the AAA service, and for VTY. So you can't just do this, you're not done. You still have to tell the different services to authenticate using this AAA service.
Okay. So you pretty much copy the whole thing. And,
Yeah. In fact,
add it to.
We don't have any IP addresses here, so you can copy and paste. So this will be exactly the same on the second, third, fourth router.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Questions? No? Going once? Twice? So on Thursday, we're gonna go over firewalls, and firewalls are super important. We're not gonna do it today, and I wanna take my time. I want to take my time with firewalls, and we'll see. If we don't get to the end of it in a couple of hours on Thursday, then we'll finish it the following Tuesday, because IPS, IDS is probably gonna be similar to today, hour and a half, and we'll be done with IPS, IDS. So I'm quite confident we can finish IDS, IPS in one day easily. But I want to take my time with firewalls, and we've been talking a lot about firewalls, and I want to make sure that you're all comfortable with firewalls, and of course ACLs and ZPF, and we will get to ZPF next week. So we will probably be together for longer time on Thursday. But unless someone has a question, that's it for me for today.
Just one comment. The login failure for TACS or Radius. Every time you fail a login, even with the local or the Radius service,
yes, it
doesn't tell you exactly what failure it is. Is there a way for you to do a message of the day saying that, okay, you need to log into with Radius account?
Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head, camping. I don't think computers want to give you that level of information. Because if you are trying to hack your way into, they don't really want to say, oh, your password is incorrect or your account is incorrect. They just want to say you failed validation. But please Google it and see what you can find out and educate the rest of us. But just as a security consideration. They just want to tell you you failed validation without giving you details on exactly what failed.
Yeah, but if you're trying radius and then local, I mean, if it's, you know, working with a lot of different passwords, it's like, unless you know, most of the IT has so many passwords, it's like, yeah, I think I know what it is, but
Well, that's why we need, you know, a directory service. I mean,
Yeah.
what you said is so true, and this is why we want to use a directory service. And I don't want to go back to saying, you know, when you get a job, and if you find out, you know, people have multiple accounts and different passwords for different services and servers and devices, you know, a directory service can fix that problem and other problems as well. And I hope, you know, you will rally the people around you with a solution. Don't forget about Active Directory. You know, if you can just use Active Directory for all these different products and services, then why have a second, a third directory service? Just use the one you have. And Active Directory is quite common.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. And I look forward to seeing all of you on Thursday. We'll talk firewalls.
Okay.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye, Zico.
Bye, Zika.
Goodbye.